Hello and welcome back to the next One Piece review and discussion. We are here with the next installment following on from the reveal of Loki's Devil Fruit, and it was insane. So, without further ado, chapter 1175, the Niddhoggr, which is obviously the Norse mythological dragon that sleeps beneath the whale tree and is absolutely enormous. We are getting confirmation this chapter that this dragon is indeed the Niddhoggr fruit. So, the cover story request this chapter is koala eating like a little tea with another koala while Sabo is chilling in the back, getting sort of trampled on by many little koalas, like little joeys. So, very fun to see there. But anyway, last we had left off, the kids had reached the end of the pier. Summer had destroyed the ship accidentally, but it worked out for him because he was this very sadistic, very twisted man who just wanted to watch them suffer and was going to relish in it, watching that the parents were helpless as they followed Gunko's arrow to the end of the pier and they were going to fall off, and the kids were worried, were scared, and were beginning to beg for forgiveness because they thought this was divine punishment for all the wrong or all the bad they had done in their life thus far as just a small child. And we had those like flashback sequences of what each of them believed that they had done wrong, and they were like really scared, and it was really heartwarming and just devastating to watch Ripley step up first as Colin was in the front and just embrace her child and just fall off the cliff, not knowing what we now saw at the end of the chapter, but just was so like confirmed in her choice and didn't know what was going to happen, but knew that she wasn't going to let her child fall by himself. She wasn't going to let him die alone. So she was there the whole way, and the other parents and like Rode and Oimo all stepped in to grab a hold of each child so that, you know, they wouldn't fall by themselves. And they were still being pierced at this point now by Summer's brambles that were still wrapped around each child, and they all were bloodied, were just in a free fall through the sky cloud. Summer was having the time of his life, and it ended with them all landing on this unknown shape, much closer to the cloud than they thought. But they were saved, and they begun to hear Luffy's voice, and Ja Rule spoke to the West Village as snow and thunder began. And it was said that on a fated day, when this was to appear, the sun god would rise. And we saw Luffy, Little Ragnar, and the giant demonic dragon that was Loki, and he was enormous. Like, the size comparison of him was huge. So we kick back off over with the rest of the Straw Hats, and it turns out there is a weakness to Summer's brambles, and it is Sanji's heat. Sanji kicks the brambles like precisely where Robin is like still wrapped up in, and he just burns them away. And we see everyone's ecstatic. Everyone's like, well, in Sanji, like that's what you're here for, you know, that's our boy. And Jinbei's like, so it seems that the brambles can't handle high temperature, so it's that kind of natural weakness of plant-based stuff, I guess. But Robin's like, look, we can't sort of celebrate too early here. There is an incredible haki and that roar that's just gone, and Sanji's like looking off into the distance, and where you can see like the bunch of shadows of the large nightmare like creatures like the dragons and stuff, there is just an even bigger shadow of just like the spikes and the wings sticking up above the clouds of Loki's shape here. And we see that where he is actually the other side of the branch over in the West Village, where he has dropped off the kids and all of the very injured adults now. And he just dumps them in the West Village, and they're like, Loki, you need to get them somewhere safer. And he's like, not my problem. Like, they fell on me. I'm just dropping them off here. So we see now another double spread of this giant dragon form he takes. Luffy perched on his head next to Ragnar. And Luffy is just blissfully unaware of everything else going on around him. It's just like, oh, Zoro, my guy, how's it going? And Zoro's like, you've actually got to be kidding me. Like, this is Loki. And he's like, yeah, he just turned into a dragon. It's pretty cool, isn't it? Like, he's just doing his thing. So Zoro's like full like battle ready. Like, he's just dealt with like the demonic giants. And he is like, look, can you deal with all the nightmares, you and Loki? Like, they are huge dream monsters, you know. They're from the kids' nightmares, you know. Elbaf isn't going to last long if they keep rampaging. He's like, yep, on it. That sounds good to us. And we see that all of the parents are looking down at like these like needle spikes that are like sticking in the ground everywhere. And it turns out that Summer is raging, and he throws all these thorns back on the children, and it is nuts. We see he has got a hold of all the children again, all wrapped in vines. Now, whether this is because he's rebound them, or whether they were still under the effect of the devil fruit, because they actually really didn't leave his range, it's hard to say. I look back at last chapter, and there's a brief panel where Colin's talking to Ripley while they then hear Luffy's voice on the back of Loki, and it didn't look like he had brambles, but for all intents and purposes, the brambles are meant to be invisible until you go and like interact with them. So whether just for that panel we couldn't see them, and now we need to see them again, so the brambles are just translucently appearing, so we know that they're still captured by Summer. But Summer's not holding back anymore now. He's pissed. He wants to relish in this like carnage. So the like sort of snake vines that he was using, all again very similarly produce these like Gatling turrets from their mouths, and are beginning to wind up and fire all those needles at the kids who are currently restrained and cannot move. And Summer is like crying. He's like, this is priceless. He is in love with this moment. He's like, it's even better than I imagined. And the parents can't move. Like, they're injured. The spikes have already like set off. It is a tight moment before our boy Zoro comes in and just deflects every single spike, just annihilates them all. And we see that Luffy's like, that's my guy, way to go, Zoro. You know, he's like, I knew you had it in the bag, this is it. And then Luffy leaps into the clouds, grabs a lightning akin to what we saw during the Kaido fight, grabs this lightning. He's like, that's Zoro, he's a part of my crew, and don't you dare forget it. And he locks onto Summer, and Luffy winds up a giant attack, and he like twists his arm through the lightning, and he goes back to do his Thor rifle. But this is obviously the Gear 5th version, where he just obliterates Summer. And I mean, the panel here where Summer is getting crushed and then just disintegrates, it is like a slight call to what Loki did to Harold. Like, it splinters Summer's body here. Like, it is nuts, the damage that he's just done in this attack. And there's a big explosion, and we see that the brambles have fallen. Summer can't retain them. The kids have been saved, and Ripley takes a final moment before she falls unconscious. Like, I finally got to see Luffy's white form. Wow, he really is like Nika. Like, I believe he's the one that's gonna like save us. And then we cut to Loki leaving to go and deal with all of the nightmares that are still left standing. And there's a cut over to Chopper and Gabon, who are off somewhere safe. It looks like a cave or off by the tree branch. And we are looking at Gabon here, who is saying, he's thinking back on what Yarul had told him during that moment in the castle when Loki first acquired the fruit, because they're witnessing its power. And this is the first time Gabon's actually seen it being used. So clearly Gabon wasn't in the throne room when Loki first took the form, but now he's like, wow, that form is nuts. And he remembers what Yarul told him, which is, in the past of Elbaf in legend, there was a god of war. I see where we're just going here. There was a god of war who fought with Ragnir. So the hammer has been around for a while. And it is said that he took on the form of a giant dragon and he locked horns with the sun god. Now, I think the words particularly here are chosen because I don't know if it's being implied that they were complete enemies, but maybe they were, somehow locked in fight and then maybe became allies, because this doesn't strike me as two individuals who are heated against each other, because I believe that these two will have worked together against Eam, and we'll find out why. So he was accompanied by his loyal partner, obviously the ice squirrel Ratatoskia. So just blatantly saying that this is Ratatoskia, like no other name, is fair enough. But to make a long story short, as Yarul says, he died, and the Ratatoskia came into possession of the weapon Ragnir and awaits his master's return. So it actually turned out that back in the past, Ragnir and the hammer were separate entities and have somehow, through a devil fruit, combined to be now one and the same item. So I don't know what Oda's going to do with that one, but clearly here, Ratatoskia was sat aside while the hammer is in this god of war's giant hand. And clearly the two aren't connected, but now we know that they are one and the same item. So who knows what shenanigans has caused this. But so the legend goes, Ratatoskia would await his master's return, or someone worthy enough for the devil fruit. And Ja Rule explains that what is crazy is that, the mythological dragon fruit of Niddhoggr here, the dragon fruit, is said to transform someone into the world's most colossal dragon. So whoever eats the fruit will become the biggest dragon on this planet. And he says the size of the creature is relative to the initial size of whoever eats it. So the whole reasoning of why it was here in the first place and where its real power comes in from is the only person who can really draw out the true power and nature of the dragon would be a giant, particularly an ancient giant, because those were even bigger than any other giant. So the combination of using the dragon fruit potential with someone like Harold or Loki would say that the dragon would reach its true potential or its final form, and it would be able to breathe lightning. It would bring out these like frost storms. It had this huge jet black body that could turn an entire day into night. And even Shanks is like, okay, no wonder this forbidden fruit was here, like hiding such an immense power. Like, this is nuts. Like, how didn't anyone just grab a hold of it? And Yaril says it is because of Ragnir, the Hammer Guardian, was waiting for someone worthy enough, and it chose Loki. And we now go back into present day, where Loki is huge, barreling through the whole area, and he is just thunder breathing the entirety of all of the final nightmares, like a huge cataclysmic blast of thunder just erupts, and as all the dream nightmares disappear, Gunko in demonic form is just sort of flying off to one side, looking at this. It briefly jumps to Marijwa, where Eam is obviously perceiving through Gunko here. Now, a note at this moment, when Eam first appeared, they said that Marijwa was on fire and all craziness was going on. But Marijwa in this moment looks fine. There doesn't seem to be a problem. So I don't know what Ian was saying back then, but clearly the Marijwa we are seeing here doesn't look to be under attack or threat in any way. But Eam recognises the Niddhoggr dragon here. They recognise that this was the dragon from a long time ago, and says, it was here all along. And that is where the chapter concludes. Great chapter to see the true power and deadliness of Loki, and why he was chosen, why he was the only one who could truly wield this fruit to its potential. And now we have a connection to this god of war, who I think locked horns, as it said, with the sun god Nika at the time, with Joy Boy probably, but then became allies against Eam, and thus Eam's reaction here of they recognise the Niddhoggr, they know this is the devil fruit that probably caused them so much pain and hassle back in the Void Century, and they're witnessing the rebirth now of the sun god Nika, the dragon. I think Eam is now starting to panic, and I don't know where Eam's head is at now of how they're going to deal with this situation, because do you just cut your losses at this point and go, the kids are now saved, my holy knights were useless, I'm going to just retreat and rebuild and deal with what's coming? Or are they going to attempt to use Domi Reversi on Loki and just let him run rampage, which is another big potential theory we think is going to happen. But no break, so chapter will release next week. Looking forward to it, but thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Let me know what you thought of this chapter, and I'll see you guys next time.